Sydney thought that she was going on a date, and she hoped with her whole heart this will be the last one, just like most of us who are on dating apps, anyways. She got dressed up, snapped a little selfie, and sent it to her friend group. A Snapchat with a caption, "Ready for my date." There's an almost unspoken rule, conscious or not, that every girl has. Maybe boys too, but I'm not a boy, so I can't speak for the boys, right? But almost every girl snaps a picture of themselves just before their date. They want to be safe just in case this date leads in a direction that's less than favorable. We want the people in our lives, the people who care for us, to know exactly what we were last wearing, who we were with, what we were going to be doing, or where we were headed, right? Again, whether this is conscious or subconscious, I don't know, but most of us do it. No one ever truly believes that things will go south, though. And I honestly doubt that Sydney expected things to end the way that they did. But no one knew that that Snapchat would be the very last time they would hear from her. And she would never come back. What started as a left swipe here and a right swipe there with a flashy message of "you got a match" on Tinder ended with dismemberment, a manhunt, and honestly one of the most brutal crime in Nebraska's history. This is the story of Sydney Loofe and the monsters she thought were just people with charming profiles, people that were going to be a part of her life, or she had hoped would be a part of her life and her future. Well, hello there. Welcome to Crimes Digested, a place where we try to digest senseless crimes. If you're new here, welcome. And if this is not your first time seeing my face, I just want to say a quick thank you for taking time out of your day to join me for this video. On this channel, once or twice a week, depending on my anxiety and depression, we try to delve into some of the most perplexing true crime stories happening around us every single day. Most of these are honestly sad, some are unbelievable, and sometimes they're unexpectedly tragic. But for the most part, these stories are a constant reminder of the darker side of humanity. As always, today's story doesn't disappoint, unfortunately. So I'm gonna invite you to join me as we delve into this morbid and bizarre case. A story that just might make you delete that Tinder, that Bumble. It might make you delete your Hinge profile. Just saying, just get rid of them all of them. If you have all of them, all of them. Okay. Very quick disclaimer, and then we'll jump into today's story. I promise. Everything in this video is alleged, sometimes my own personal, very, very personal opinion that nobody asked for. Most of the information, though, is what I was able to find on the internet. So I do ask that you please form your own opinion. And if you have any additional information, any concern about anything in this video, you notice anything wrong, anything misleading, I'm gonna ask you to just please leave it down in the comment section so that we can all learn from each other, because as I always say, it's never too late to learn. But at the same time, let's try to be respectful to one another in the comment section so that everyone can feel safe to share whatever's on their mind, their thoughts, their opinion, what they ate, and whether they pooped today. But with that said, let's jump in. Really quick, I'm gonna ask you to get on your train or plane, or if you prefer, your horse. I'm going ahead and just hop on really quick, because today we're gonna be taking a quick trip to Wilbur, Nebraska, a quiet town. And when I say quiet, I mean really quiet, with fewer than 2,000 people, where one woman's search for love and connection ended in cold-blooded horror. A predator couple looking for their next game, their next prey, for their quote unquote amusements, to satisfy this sick and twisted fantasy that they shared. And Sydney Irene Loofe, young, trusting, walked into a web-like trap carefully laid by two people who lived for control, and she was none the wiser. Sydney was born on August 21st, 1993, raised in Nearly, Nebraska as the second child of George and Susie Loofe. She's what is known as the middle child, aka the forgotten child, but she couldn't be further from being a forgotten child or an invisible child. She was, by many accounts, a bright and thoughtful, a little shy but fiercely independent, and absolutely obsessed with her cats. Okay, she had this close bond with her older brother and younger sister. Sydney was so full of life. You couldn't help but notice her. And right after she finished high school, she started living alone with her beloved cats. And like most of us, she spent a lot of her time doom scrolling on social media, no judgment, especially Snapchat. That was her home. Sydney soon after starts working at a place called Menards, something similar to Winco or Costco in some states. Or if you're more familiar with Sam's Club, then imagine that, but slightly on steroid, I would say, depending on where or what state you go to. I remember getting lost in one when I was young and living in Chicago. Now that I think about it, it probably wasn't even that big, but from a child's perspective, it was huge. And I never felt so panicked or sweated more in my life. But that's a story for another day. Sydney's coworkers loved her. During the little time that she worked there, her coworkers described her as being this like reliable and kind, someone who brought her own lunch but would share her snacks. Okay, and she was better than me. Just saying, because I'll share my lunch all day, but don't even look in the direction of my snacks. Big back activities over here, okay? And I'm only half ashamed of this activity or hobby. But I digress. Sunny was very open. She was the definition of an open book, honestly. And one of her open pages that she shared with the people around her was about her sexual orientation. Not that it was anybody's business. I am of strong mind of that, but it was an important part of her identity, and more power to her. Okay, she proudly identified herself as being bisexual or pansexual, depending on whichever one of her social media platforms you find yourself on. And just to be really quick before I continue, I do want to make one thing perfectly clear. My knowledge and understanding of the LGBTQ plus community is very, very lacking. So I'm not going to even pretend that I know enough to talk about it in depth. I do know, however, that it takes a lot of courage for many people to share that part of their life with others, especially young people growing up in a small town like she did. It's even harder to meet people who share the same interests, right? When it comes to dating, it's difficult. And so Sydney turned to Tinder, the mother app of all things hookups. If you detect some bitterness, I'm willing to go on record saying that I do feel better, okay? I used to have a Tinder account really quick, and this was way before I knew what people used Tinder for, okay? Now, I can't see myself on it anymore. Like, I can't, because I mean, it's an ocean filled with very questionable characters, and hey, I'm not here to judge, do you, boo boo? It's just not my scene. But where was I again? Oh yes. My account, one day out of nowhere, I logged in and found that it was suspended. Like, I was banned, and I didn't care enough to do all the necessary work to get it like unbanned. But I am still feeling some type of way about it. I don't judge, so don't judge, okay? Don't judge my pettiness, all right? It's just that feeling of being told you can't do something, or why haven't you done something, just makes you ugh. Even though I didn't care for it, it still irked me years later. When I think about it, I'm just annoying, okay? The only thing I can even think of that would have resulted in me getting banned was this one guy that I was talking to. and he wanted to solicit me for the devil's tango, and I said go kick rock respectfully. That's the only thing I can think of, but he probably was the one to report me. If anybody, that would have been him. Because other than that, most of my interactions on the app were unremarkable, really. But yes, Tinder, the place where naive hearts go to get broken and die. That's where everything began. The date was November 11 in the year of our good Lord 2017. Sydney got that flashy message of a match, and just like most people, when you get that message, she got a little flip in her belly, probably. I don't know. I mean, after dozens of swipes, I imagine her heart did do a little bit of a flip with some excitement and expectancy. And the woman she matched with was a beauty who went by the name Aubrey. She had eyes filled with joy for life. She was smiling in every single one of her pictures. She claimed on her profile not to be from the area. She's new in town, just a young woman looking to make new friends in a new city or town. But hiding behind that youthful, innocent, and beautiful smile was a whole lot of chaos ready to unravel. Audrey was not real, and she was not alone either. The person behind the screen, unbeknownst to Sydney, was a woman whose real name is Bailey Boswell. She lived with Audrey Trail, a 51-year-old man who was alleged to have been her sugar daddy, but their relationship went deeper than that, which is morally questionably dubious if you ask me, especially because such big age gap usually results in an unequal power dynamic. But they were both adults and of consenting age, so who am I to judge? I ain't judging. As the saying goes, let he who has no sin throw the very first stone. By now, I'm sure you're wondering, who is this Bailey character? Like, who is she? Well, I'm glad you asked. The 23-year-old Bailey Boswell grew up in Iowa. She was a former college student who dropped out early on, arrested twice for drug-related offenses. She was estranged from her family, known for being very easily impressionable and very quick to attach herself to older, more dominating partners. She's what most people would call a veritable delinquent, or at least she was on the path of becoming one. She unfortunately crosses paths with the one person she should have never ever met. Any other person, and I'm certain she would have been straightened out, but Aubrey Trail was a whole different monster, and Bailey imprints on him almost immediately. Now, let me introduce you to the man known as the real life monster. Not my words. That's what the people who knew him called him. Aubrey Trail, aka the Puppet Master, was decades older than Bailey. He had multiple aliases, a rap sheet including fraud and theft, just to name a few. Okay, this man claimed to be a dealer of rare antiques, which, if you don't speak con artist, I got you. That's translation for scammer. He was extremely skilled at manipulating young women into very strange pseudo-religious like fantasy about loyalty, control, and power. I don't like to be this person, but like looking at Aubrey, I'm just gonna say it anyway because we don't like it. I didn't get it. The appeal. He did not look like a man women, especially young, beautiful women, would be falling all over. But for some odd reason, he had these women listening to his every word like it was the Bible, and he had them wrapped around his fingers. That's a mystery that requires a lot of studying, along with his obsession with fantastical creatures. In their home, Aubrey claimed to be a vampire or witch master, depending on the day, the weather, and you never knew with him. And like every overlord, he needs his minions. And he called the women who follow him as his witches. Are you wondering what Bailey's role is in this fantasy so far? Well, good. I did too. And it gets better. Bailey was his queen and the perfect bait, his leading lady, as long as she led from behind him, of course. But regardless, she was sitting above the other witches in the food chain. And she loved and thrived on the feeling of control this gave her. But these women were still Aubrey's loyal servants, not hers. And she salivated at the thought of having her own toy to play with, someone she could control fully. And what better way to meet someone new and unsuspecting? Dating apps. Sydney and Bailey chatted for days. The vibe was flirtatious, immaculate, but casual. There seemed to be enjoying the back and forth, you know? So there was only one thing left to do. They had to meet in person. On November 14, the two met and they decided to go on a drive. They hung out for some time and, well, the initial jitters of a first date were settling. They were going away, and after the date, Sydney even told some of her friends that the date was quote fine, which I know it doesn't sound very enthusiastic, but for most girls, fine is key word for I would do it again. Adding to the fact that Sydney went as far as to say Bailey seemed like quote sweet, maybe a little nervous. I mean, fine sounds like things are good. And I hope something real comes out of it, but I don't want to jinx anything with overexcitement or say anything too soon. And that's why when Bailey texted her again the next day, like the very next day, asking to hang out that night, Sydney readily agreed. It is now November 15, 2017 at approximately 6:45 p.m. Sydney gets dressed up, puts on her little makeup, and snaps how do I look picture. But also, just in case I go missing picture, you know? Ready for my date, a smiley face. She captioned it before snapping it to her friends. That was the last time anyone heard from her. On the very next day, November 16 to be precise, Sydney doesn't show up for work. And her coworkers are immediately alarmed. Now, can we just take a quick moment to appreciate these fast thinking coworkers? I'm always pleased, like pleasantly surprised when I read stories like these because where do these people find these coworkers? Do they even exist? I feel like every place that I've ever worked at would probably just move on after a quick call or text. Okay, they might be like, she's not coming, so let me go before the news even comes out that I disappeared, you know. And yes, I'm very good at my job, that's not the problem. Okay, let me just put that out there before you get some imaginations going, you know, running wild with them imaginations. I just feel like most workplace either don't really care that much or they're just too busy to be wondering why someone didn't show up to work. Maybe the next day or the next 2 days they might feel differently, but that very same day, seeing stories like this shows you that there are still good people out there. Okay, there are still people out there that looks out for each other. But the coworkers were not the only ones with concerns. Sydney's family was also besides themselves with worries. They were anxious, panicked, calling her, just trying to find out what happened. But every call to her phone went straight to voicemail. So they wasted no time reporting her missing that very same day. And within just 24 hours, her friends launched a social media campaign. The hashtag Find Sydney Loofe began trending locally. Flyers go up across Lincoln, Wilbur, and nearby towns. Panic was gripping them. The longer she stayed missing, Police pulled her Tinder account, and that's when they get the first and the most likely lead. Her last known match and possibly her last contact was Bailey Boswell. Surveillance showed Sydney getting into Bailey's car, then nothing. When police went to question Bailey and Aubrey, however, the two they already vanished. They left town. This kicked into motion a multi-state manhunt with Bailey and Aubrey heading south. A bolo beyond the lookout was issued for Bailey's car, but the two were as slippery as eels. I kid you not. Hours pass, and then days followed by weeks go by, but yet nothing. That is until 2 weeks after Sydney disappeared on November 28, 2017. Bailey and Aubrey posted a rather cryptic, bizarre Facebook Live video. The two were in a car, Bailey's face hidden behind these sunglasses, and Aubrey is ranting. The most bizarre rant that you'll possibly hear or imagine. We've read the articles. We're not hiding. We're not guilty. We tried to help Sydney. She freaked out. Then he goes on and on and on to say, we're not who you think we are. She was chosen. In one clip, Bailey says, quote, we'll be seeing you soon. We didn't do it. We didn't do anything to Sydney. To that, Aubrey adds, Sydney is a sweet girl. We had a great night with her. As people were trying to decipher this cryptic video, the detectives were also in hot pursuit of a lead. They obtained surveillance footage, phone records, and Walmart receipts showing Aubrey and Bailey purchasing a list of items that no seasoned detective ever wants to see bought together, especially not by people suspected of a crime as volatile as these two were. The list included bleach, drop cloths, a hand like saw, and lye. Bleach is one thing. Lye? Now that's a whole other story. Best case scenario, these two were about to go home and, make some soap or something, cook something up. Very doubtful. And worst case scenario, they'll be dissolving some type of tissue. This is more likely. It wasn't until early December, about 3 weeks since her disappearance, Sydney's disappearance, when police finally located Sydney's dismembered remains in several black trash bags scattered across the rural area near Clay County. According to her autopsy, she had been strangled to death with an extension cord, and then they dismembered her with a fine-toothed saw. Then she was disposed of with very chilling precision. And get this, the bags were sealed with the same tape found in Aubrey's apartment. He couldn't even be bothered to throw it in the trash. Of course, that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. It's a great thing. But this goes to show how cocky this man was and his confidence in getting away with this crime. Thank God for dumb criminals, that's for sure. He was arrested within hours and he put up no fights. He confesses almost immediately, but in a typical narcissistic fashion. He told investigators that Sydney died during rough sex after she had agreed to, quote, sell herself to him and Bailey for $5,000. I'm the only one who killed her, though. Bailey didn't know anything. He says Sydney agreed to be killed. She was into it. It was part of a game. Followed with, it was the punishment. Just reading or listening to his rambling is migraine inducing. Because, what? He makes no sense. And the evidence showed a completely different story. Investigators quickly surmised a few things from this confession. One, Sydney had no knowledge of their so-called cults. Secondly, there was no consent. I mean, who gives consent for someone to end their life? And even if they did give consent, who could possibly in their right mind do something so vile because they were asked to? And then thirdly, she was set up. They believed that she was lured, murdered, and butchered by sick individuals living in a disturbed fantasy. In fact, it is their belief that the couple had always planned on killing someone even before they met Sydney. Both Aubrey and Bailey get charged with first degree murder, improper disposal of human remains, and last but not least, conspiracy to commit murder. Aubrey Trails was the first to be put on trial in 2019, and it was a circus. No, I don't mean a circuit court. It was a literal circus filled with clown shit activities. One example was on day 2 of trial. He slashes his own neck with a hidden razor that he brought into court, like a hidden razor blade, screaming, "Bailey is innocent." Quote, "Bailey is innocent. I curse you all." Court is adjourned and he gets hospitalized for some time. No one really knows what he was trying to accomplish with that performance, but I guess they'll find out later. But after his treatment, the trial resumes and prosecutors present their case to the jury. Sydney's hair and blood in the couple's apartment, explained that. The saw blades matching the cuts on Sydney's body, and some journal entries from Aubrey referencing punishments. Later on, he claimed to have telepathic powers, that he was part of a vampire cult, and insisted Sydney wanted to die. No one was buying what he was selling, even though it was cheap. So after some deliberation, the jury finds him guilty of first degree murder, no questions, and his sentencing was death. In 2020, Bailey Boswell's trial commenced, and it was no less frustrating because Bailey tries to paint herself as the manipulated partner, an innocent bystander who had no choice. She had no choice but to participate in this crime because, well, she was just too weak to stand up for herself. She was a follower. Her defense claimed that Bailey was afraid of Aubrey. She had no idea of his plans to kill Sydney, and more importantly, she wasn't even present when it happened. Basically, this poor young woman was an unknowing and unwilling participant in this brutal crime. But the prosecution came to prosecute. They came for violence. They explained that GPS data shows Bailey at the dump sites. There was a Walmart footage of her buying the cleanup tools and cell tower pings matching Aubrey's during every leg of the crime. Did he take her phone with him? How does she even explain that? Well, she couldn't. So after weeks of testimonies, her jury came back within just hours with a verdict: guilty on all counts. With this, her fate was sealed and she received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Aubrey attempted to appeal his conviction, and you will not believe his ground of appeal. Guess. Okay, maybe not. Remember the outburst in court when he tried to off himself? Well, him and his defense team tried to argue about how that might have affected his final verdict, since it was impossible for the jury to remain impartial. But this appeal was very quickly, expeditiously dismissed. The court's reasoning: he doesn't get to use his own unruly actions to his benefit. You know what this reminds me of, though? I covered a case a while ago about a man who literally threw a pen at the jury because he thought they were racially biased and would discriminate against him. He even injured someone. He had an outburst about how they they were racist because, well, the panel was disproportionately white, which I agree is kind of, I find that kind of suspicious to have a panel that's disproportionately white, especially with a black man. But because of his belief that he might be unfairly judged, he wanted the case dismissed or appealed, and the court said no. And this case is like a mirror of that story. But once he realized that he wasn't getting any lighter in sentence just because he decided to throw a little tantrum, he threw in the towel and requested the Supreme Court to write the warrant for his execution. On the other hand, Bailey's defense team, to this day, they continue to appeal her sentence. She made some feeble attempts to appeal this decision, but like I said, very, very feeble attempts, okay? Her whole appeal hangs in the judge throwing out some of the evidence used in her initial trial, like Aubrey's testimonies and the number of pictures taken of the dismembered remains. You heard that right. Yeah. They said that there were more pictures than the body parts, so it shouldn't be admissible. But the appeal was rejected. And the reason? Multiple pictures were expected with multiple angles due to the nature and the fact that they cut the patient and scattered the page, or I say patient, oh my god, the the what's it called, the work me is coming out. I'm over here thinking about patients, the victim. Okay, they're like, you cut the victim up and scatter them all over the place, so the number of pictures taken is necessary to get all the angles needed for exhibition for the trial. But then they wanted to argue about how the use of the words like witchcraft or cult was prejudicial, but that also failed. I mean, the evidence against them is damning. And honestly, it feels like they're just scrabbling for whatever they can find, any straw they can find. Basically, throwing arguments out, like throwing pasta to the wall to see if it sticks or not. But nothing panned out. One of the biggest things to note is the fact that Nebraska is usually very, very reserved when it comes to the death penalty. But in this case, they did not hesitate. They woke up for violence. So now, how do you feel? Mortified? Angry? Maybe sad? Horrified even? If you answered all of the above, well, lucky you. You won a prize because you're part of the majority of people who heard or saw this story unfold. People were horrified. The most chilling part was women who came out after the story became public to share their own close calls with sketchy Tinder dates, creepy pickup artists, and dumb sub arrangements gone extremely wrong. TikTok users were posting makeup transformations videos, and they had Sydney's final word over their videos with a selfie with captions that read stuff like, this is what trusting the wrong person looks like. And on Reddit, users were posting, quote, it's like something out of a horror movie. Only these people were real and they weren't sorry. Most true crime creators noted the silence from Tinder, which, yes, they can't really do anything about what people do behind the scene, like what goes on behind the scene. And an insincere apology is more insulting than none at all, but the complete silence just felt like a slap in the face to many people, especially people that have faith in online dating. Most people were disappointed, to say the least. Some people felt like there should be a better vetting system put in place, but let's be honest, none of these apps are going to invest that much time and resource into doing background checks on every one of their members. Signing up to those apps is practically consenting to whatever happens on the apps. Not saying that's okay, obviously, but that's the reality of things, I guess. And then there was a debate around consent and predatory manipulation with some discourses on Aubrey trail as well as the media's role in feeding his narcissism. Sydney's parents, George and Susie, created the Sydney Loofe Memorial Scholarship to honor her life. Her mother wrote a statement and it beautifully reads, "Sydney was light. She was fierce in her loyalty. We were robbed," end quote. Her sister also shared her disappointment and sadness for the loss of Sydney's life, her sister's life. She explained how they grew up thinking small towns were safe, end quote. Now we look over our shoulders, even at smiles. The town of Nellie held a candlelit vigil for her every year since her death. These two, both Aubrey and Bailey, were people who acted more savage than animals in the wild. This story had all the makings of a textbook coercive cult dynamics. The whole love bombing, the financial dependency, and the punishment disguised as a spiritual growth or revelation. Bailey may have started as a victim, but in the end, she was fully complicit. And Aubrey Trail didn't just kill. He collected vulnerable women open to pain, isolated them with promise of love, money, spiritual power to control them. And he didn't want a partner. He wanted control. That's it. He wanted to be worshipped. So he built a world where these women were his playthings, puppets that moved or were supposed to move at his will, a puppet master. Then Bailey, if any of what she is saying is to be believed, bought into it all. Sydney, on the other hand, well, she was just fun to hunt, unfortunately. In the end, there was no witchcraft, there was no vampires. Just two broken people playing gods with someone's life, someone's child's life, someone's sister's life. And together they were a perfect storm of narcissism, delusion, and cruelty. Dating apps have connected people all over the world. Heck, I know people in decades plus relationships who met through dating apps, right? They met online dating, but they're also perfect hunting ground for unsavory characters from its inception. Sydney was naive. She wasn't asking for it. She was doing what millions and millions of people do every day nowadays, meeting someone online. Her only mistake was trusting the wrong person, or rather the wrong people. The life of Sydney Loofe was cut extremely short because she trusted in the good in people. She died because of these two monsters who have mastered the art of hiding behind smiles and profile pictures, and now a whole family is left grieving a life and future that would have been, but never will. But this concludes today's video. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story. So please don't be shy. Leave them below in the comments. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, okay? And if there's a case you're interested in, let me know. Let me know. Maybe we can digest together. Maybe we can, you know what? I said that already. But try to stay smart, stay curious, and stay off online meetups for a while, okay? But with that, I wish you a fantastic day. And I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Bye.